Hi there, this is Jenny from the Sewing Palace in Helena, Montana. Today, Charlene Mila is going to show you how to make the inside-out placemat. This is a perfect quilt-as-you-go place setting.
So the fabric that we're using for our pattern today is a Moda fabric called Naughty or Nice. And it's very colorful, it's very pretty, with some grays, reds, greens, whites, but it's beautiful fabric for this placemat. We've also kitted these placemats for you, so there's an easy kit for you to make, and this kit makes 4 placemats for you. So as you can see, this inside-outside mat is a kind of quilt-as-you-go placemat, and it's got a very interesting construction, but I really thought it was very fun, and I think you will also like it, so let's get started. Talk about the cutting instructions. For 4 placemats, you're going to need to cut 4 of each of the following: the soft and stable inside, the front of the placemat, and the back of the placemat. And these are cut at 13 inches by 18 inches. Okay, so you have all 3 of those pieces. You're also going to cut some border strips. These border strips are 21 inches long by 3 inches wide, and they are trimmed in a green piece of fabric that is 21 inches by 1¼ inch. So we're going to start the process by cutting all of those pieces out first before we get started. Once we've done that, then we can begin to sew. So let me show you our next step. The 3-inch border piece and the 1¼ inch trim piece, you're going to put them right sides together and sew this trim piece down one side of this 21-inch strip. Once you've sewn those together, you're going to press it up and you're going to turn it over, and it leaves about a 1/2 inch of this green strip at the top.
The pattern calls for a foam batting in between the layers. You can use soft and stable or Basel double-sided fusible foam. You will fuse the front and the back to the foam.
So when I used the soft and stable to make the placemat, I had to use 505 spray to spray the pieces to the placemat so that it would adhere to the soft and stable. So after I made my first one, I decided I really liked the NR Form double fusible stabilizer better than I liked the soft and stable. And we have that on a bolt. It's called NR Form. And it does have double-sided fusible. So it is much easier to make the placemats with that foam. So the first thing we need to do is then fuse the fabric to the front and back of the NR Form. And you just iron it on, and it'll look like this. One piece is on the front and one piece on the back, whichever you choose. But your fabric kits that we have made together are going to be these fabrics, okay? So our first step is to take the placemat itself, and you're going to build 4 of these strips. This is your 3-inch border strip and your 1¼ inch trim strip. Those get laid on your placemat, and I let the sides overlap because you're going to cut them after you're done sewing them on. And you're going to line up the raw edges, and then you're going to pin this onto each side. You're going to do it one at a time. So you're going to do one side and then move to the next side. And you're going to sew one at a time. So eventually, once you keep going around the entire placemat, it's going to build as you sew. So let's start that process. And the border and the trim strip onto the placemat front, right sides together, raw edges out. Now we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam on each strip as we build it around the piece. Okay, we're going to set the machine on straight stitching, and I have the straight stitch plate on the machine. You could also use your regular stitch plate also. I've set the foot at 97 because I have a 97 1/4 inch foot on, and my stitch plate is on the regular stitch plate. Okay, so let's begin sewing. Also might want to engage your dual feed if you have a 5, 7, or 8 series machine. That's going to help you sew much easier on the foam. And the other option is you could use a walking foot also, which would help you on any other machine that might not have a dual feed. So we're going to take the second piece of border trim and we're going to lay it right on top at one corner and go down the second side. And where you're going to sew is you're now going to sew starting at the edge straight down, turn, and come across the bottom of the fabric. So we're going to begin to sew here at the top, go down to the bottom, okay, to the corner, turn at the corner, and go around. I'm also going to back stitch right here where I first start. Last border strip. So let's go down, sew again, down to the corner. Turn and go down our final side. On the very last one, of course, you have to come back up the very last side to make sure that this final corner is sewn in place. And our next step will be to go to the cutting mat board to trim off our edges. Line up my mat right along the edge of the placemat, and I'm going to trim off these extra pieces of fabric. So I'll do that as I go around the entire placemat, doing all 4 corners. Now that we've done that step, what I'm going to do is I want to trim up the foam and the fabric around the edges before we turn inside out. So there's a 1/4 inch seam, so I'm going to take about 1/8 of an inch off of the inside just to have a little less bulk on the inside after we turn it. So you want to turn it and do all 4 edges of your mat. Eliminate some of the bulk at the corner. I'm also going to trim across the edge to do a cross cut just to eliminate some of that bulk in each of the corners. Step is to turn the placemat inside out. So all of these edges you're going to turn them totally inside out at the corners like this. Press out the corners with your finger, your thumb. And then we'll also use a tool, turning tool, to help us finish and get them nicely turned and pointed. So we have options of different tools. We have this really nice Hold It Precision Stiletto, which is really nice to use, this rubber end especially because it won't poke through the fabric. We have a point turner, which is also can be used as a seam creaser. And then we have an OESD expert point press and tool, and it has 2 different metal ball ends in order to use this as a pressing tool. And we're going to put them inside, press our corners nice, and get those points pressed out as best we can. So now let's press our edges. So we want to pull up the borders and get a nice straight press on the sides here with our iron. So on our woolly pressing mat here, we're going to press so we get a really nice crease on the edges of our borders. And we want to do that all around the placemat before we pin it. Now we've got all of the edges turned out, and I've started to pin around the edges. So these border and trim strips you're going to pin on the side so that you can stitch around the whole top, and you're actually kind of quilting it in place because your stitching that you're going to be stitching is going to go through the entire project and kind of quilt the back side also. So at this point, before we start stitching, because I want a nice even stitch all the way around my placemat, I'm going to switch out the feet on my machine, and I'm going to take my 97 foot off and I'm going to put on a 10C foot. Okay, so why we're using the number 10 foot is because it can give us an even stitch all the way around if we put this guide right in the ditch. So the ditch is going to be right between the border fabric and the trim fabric, and you're going to lay that guide right in the center. You're going to move your needle to the left 2 to 3 clicks, and you're going to be sewing about 1/8 of an inch into the green trim border. So remember, you have to change the presser foot because we're going to change from the 96 foot to the 10, and then we're going to start stitching. We moved our needle over. Let me clear it and make sure I have it where I want it. I've moved the needle a couple clicks over to the left, and we're going to begin top stitching around the placemat. Now, as I get to where the next border piece starts, I'm going to lift it just a little bit, and I am going to sew underneath of the oncoming border strip. I'm going to back stitch 2 or 3 stitches, cut my threads, bring it up and come down right here on the next piece. And I'm going to do that as I go around the entire piece, sewing and back stitching when I start and stop, keeping that foot right in the ditch. This seam, I'm going to lift my piece just a little bit right here at the corner so that I can start stitching right underneath. I'm going to bring my needle down so that I can see that I'm putting my guide right in the ditch, putting my foot down, and then I'm going to go down another side. We're on our very last seam, coming down the last. We're back to where we started. We're just going to go over our previous stitching, back stitch a few stitches, and cut our threads. So we have gone all the way around the placemat, and now all we have to do is press again, press all of our pieces down. If you want to do some additional quilting, you can certainly stick it in your machine and add some additional quilting to it if you desire. If not, you have a really nice finished placemat.
Thanks for joining the Sewing Palace and one of our inspirational videos, Making the Inside Out Place Setting. Thank you to Poorhouse Quilts for a wonderful pattern. Please visit our website for shopping inspiration. Happy sewing!